It's around 1 a.m. and I'm going to film the moon. It's very orange in color and very large, and it's very low. I'll just show you how low. It's right over Toronto, south of me, and right over the Humber Bay area. You can see all the activity and how many orbs are on it. The whole thing is orbs. Look at that. The whole thing is orbs. And that's a large cluster right there. A bunch of large clusters making an even larger cluster. This is a hologram. The only thing that's different is that now it's very orange, but otherwise it's still the same hologram. It's much lower tonight than usual, and closer. I can get right on it, no problem. Just look at those orbs and how fast they're counter-rotating. That's a big cluster. Lots of big clusters all over. Just look at all that activity. The whole thing is made up of orbs, but these are not just tiny little orbs. These are tiny little orbs plus a lot of very large clusters and all kinds in between. There's a lot of them. It's a busy night up there tonight. This is again in the Earth's atmosphere. It's so low you feel like you can touch it. It's the same effect as I was filming in the trees the other day. And the same exact effect. So you can see that these orbs in the trees do go up into the atmosphere and form that moon hologram at night whenever the moon hologram shows up. Other times they form clouds. So it's either the moon hologram or clouds, or else they just blanket the entire sky black and you can't see any stars or anything. They just blanket the entire sky. And that's the center of a large cluster right there. They're trying all kinds of ways to avoid showing up on film. So they're changing color. They're changing the texture by filling it in more or less. They're trying everything to avoid showing up on film. And it's obvious that they're doing that. So that shows they're very intelligent, since they care about what shows up on film. If they were just insects, they wouldn't be worried about things like that. So these are highly intelligent and organized entities. They're not just your ordinary insect. And they may not be insects, but they behave like insects. I have no idea what they are. They behave like insects. The social structure seems like it's an insect social structure. Wow, that changed shape fast. Look at that. Let's see what else shows up. You have to be just at the right focus to be able to see things. But that changed shape right away at that focal length. The whole thing is changing shape. I'm just gonna get it in the middle. So that I can watch it change shape. Notice the shape changing of the entire hologram. So what's happening there is they're moving masses of them around to different spots of the hologram and image, and they're changing the entire structure and shape of the hologram just by moving themselves around in large masses. That's how that's happening. Look at those large clusters there. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 large clusters. They look as large as mountains. But they're not mountains. That's just piles of ores. Yeah. They've piled them on into specific areas, and that's what's changed the entire structure and the image even. Look at the size of those big clusters. What they've done is cluster up into larger clusters than before, so that they've changed the entire structure and the entire image of the hologram. I'll back off. And you can see the large clusters. They look like mountains. But all they are is large clusters of all these orbs. Those clusters are at least hundreds of meters, if not a few kilometers, maybe more large, depending on how far the image is away from me, the hologram, depending how far that is away from me. Those things are very large. They're much larger than usual. And like I said lots of times before, there's no limit to the cluster size out in the atmosphere, or even less limit out in space, because they have lots of room there. On the ground, the clusters tend to be smaller, or near the ground they tend to be smaller also, because for the simple reason there's just not enough room for them to be spreading out that large. But in the atmosphere they have lots of room, and out in space they have more room than that. So they could be infinitely large, or as you can see, there's still a lot of small individual entities right there. They could be a lot smaller than that. They could be infinitely small. And that's what's the advantage of these organisms. They could be either large or small. They operate all as one unit, and they're very cooperative from the looks of it, and they also are very intelligent, and they have all the qualities of a perfect predator. And if they're insects, that's not a good idea, and not a good sign for us, because if they're insects like the insects down here on Earth, all insects primarily do is eat and breed. They make more insects, and that's exactly the pattern that I've been observing with these organisms. They eat and breed, but they're intelligent and do the whole thing in a very cooperative way and at a fast pace. Look at the pace of life that they have. Just look at how fast that pace of life is. It's just amazing. It's amazing they never collide. I always wondered how they do that. So many of them all in one spot like that, especially when they make a hologram. And then there's so many of them like that. I always wondered why they don't ever collide. So they must have some built-in mechanism naturally not to collide. That black cloud there is just more of them. I'll just close in on it to show. Like, just black ones, and they form black clouds, but that's no cloud. No cloud around that hologram is a real cloud. They're all orbs. They're orb clouds. The whole atmosphere is filled with those things. And if they're insects and do the insect thing, that's real bad news for us. Because insects aren't picky, they eat everything. They have a varied diet, and we could be considered food. Just look at the sizes of those clusters, and there's a lot more entities this morning than there normally is. The hologram is not as sparse as some nights or mornings or during the day even. Notice those gaps are filled in a lot more. They're no longer empty. So there must have been a gathering tonight and this morning for so many to be out there. But that's still all in our atmosphere. That's not out in space. If it was out in space, I wouldn't get a bigger picture than that. And I get that big cluster right there. Try and show it. The camera wants to. There. There's two of them. A really big, maybe three. Look at them in the atmosphere. That's not on the hologram. The atmosphere is just full of those things. Now you can really see the orbs. There's just so many of them. I used to have to add brightness increase like 12 times to get them to show up like that. Now I don't need anything. That just tells me one thing. There's a whole lot more of them in our atmosphere. Just look at how many. You notice the hologram moving back and forth? I had taken it out of the picture and it keeps sneaking back in, and I wasn't even touching the camera. It's supposed to be moving the other way, to the right. Now I'm going to move the camera towards it. Look at the whole thing just shaking. The camera is on a tripod and it doesn't shake. Anyway, it has auto stabilizer, so any shaking is the hologram shaking. Now I'm going to move the camera back and get the hologram. Look at all that activity. Something's up because it's real bright. Now it's going up into that black cloud. Just look at that. Look how many there are. Things don't look good. That whole thing there that's covering it up is a cloud of orbs. Just look at that. This is all just black from orbs. There's so many of them that the entire sky has turned dark, even with the hologram shining. They cover it right up. Just look at all of them. We have a serious problem here, and people better wake up. This is becoming a serious problem. Whoever says these things came to help us is way off the mark and badly mistaken. I'm going to regret saying that one day when these things start doing what they do best. That's an awful lot of them, and a lot of big clusters. And look at all the rest of them. They're all over. The atmosphere is so filled with them that there is no room for air. And people better get that through their head. There's not going to be room for air. How many of these things are just multiplying every single minute? So that's your moon hologram for today. Thank you for viewing.